There are places in this world where the unexplained will suddenly become akin to comfort, allowing the bizarre to bleed into the atmosphere. Within the city of Jefferson, Texas, resides such a location, in the form of a hotel that shares the city's name, in which the things that go bump in the night have begun to open doors, roam the halls, and reveal themselves. The question is why? Why is this happening? Having never been there, I can't answer that question. But on October 1st and 2nd, 50 of you will have the chance to join me for a weekend-long paranormal investigation at AGH Presents The Ghosts of the Jefferson Hotel. My friends, I am incredibly excited about this event. To those of you that have already purchased your tickets, thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you face to face in Jefferson, Texas. And for those of you who wish to join us at AGH Presents The Ghosts of the Jefferson Hotel, VIP tickets are sold out and there's only 15 gold tickets left. But you can get your gold tickets while they last by clicking the ticket link, which I've posted below in the description box. Having said that, let's jump right into the In a Crowded Room podcast. Hey, what's up everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 135, which I just wanted to share a conversation that I had with Laura and get your guys' thoughts. We were actually watching the Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier fight and the post-fight interviews. And you have to understand that Laura loves all the nice guys. Like, her favorite fighters are Dustin Poirier and Wonder Boy. And I have a tendency to like the dudes that are a little bit meaner. As Laura would say, you like all the meanies. So I am a Conor McGregor fan. But I'd like to specify this. I'm a storyteller. So I love stories, right? And the ascension of McGregor to the top was one of the most amazing things to watch. I mean, he was starching the best in the game in seconds, you know, and then his fight over Eddie was just like the craziest thing I've ever seen. He just took that kid to school. Now, after the Floyd thing, when Conor got, you know, filthy rich, he topped the Forbes list for athletes last year. Of course, his downfall is also another part of the story. So I'm just fascinated with stories. When McGregor loses, I don't get any more worked up than when he wins. I just like the personality, kind of that cult of personality, right? Where Laura, she likes just the nice guy. She's like, we were watching Wonder Boy come to the ring, and she was like, he just looks like such a nice boy. And she told me that she had a dream where Dustin Poirier was me. It was my personality and me talking, but I was Dustin Poirier. And I'm like, well, what else happened in that dream, Laura? And she's like, nothing, which I think she's lying. I think she doesn't want to tell me. But we did get into kind of an interesting conversation that really made me kind of question the world that we are living in today. And I do want to get you guys' thoughts about this. And for those of you that wanted to hear more high school stories, I have a couple that I'm going to tell you at the end here that relate to this. But we were talking about basically good guys and bad guys, and how it seems to be like, you know, a time where supervillains are just becoming huge. And Dustin Poirier was asked in the post press conference, he said, listen, the guy asked him the question, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, you know, Dustin, what do you make of this? Like, you're a good guy, you know, you're wishing Conor home to his family and everybody safely, and you haven't engaged in the trash talk. And McGregor was going hard, telling him he was going to kill him. His body was a corpse. He was he was talking smack about, I guess, Poirier's wife was in his DMs, in Connor's DMs, and Connor took some low blows. Did I like the low blows about, his wife? No, because that's one thing that I wouldn't be able to lay back on. I mean, if somebody ever talks smack to me in my face about Laura, I mean, it's on sight, period. It's just how it would be, So I didn't love that, but it just, again, makes him this supervillain. And they were asking Poirier, like, what do you make of this, that you're getting an arena full of booze when you just beat Conor McGregor, the biggest MMA star in the world, for the second time? Even if it was an ankle break, you beat him. And Poirier was confused. He was like, yeah, I really don't know what to say, and because Poirier has he does a lot of charity work, a lot of stuff in Africa. I mean, he's raised a lot of money for charity. And he just, didn't engage with Connor's stuff. And he genuinely does seem like a pretty nice guy. And, again, the guy was asking him, what do you make of the fact that Connor, this supervillain has, so many big fans and you're getting booed? And he said, it's the world we live in. And it was kind of an interesting thought, because I expanded it, past MMA, and it is a pretty weird time. Like, when I was growing up, I remember reading about Henry Hill snitching and being like, pretty much looking over his shoulder forever. And this guy was not a hero for doing it. And just in general, I grew up that, I don't know, the one thing my father always instilled to me is that, beyond, hard work and integrity in your word, like loyalty was one of the best qualities that you can have and look for. And so I just always had that idea that I'm not down with like snitches. But I look right now and it's such a weird time, because like Sammy the Bull Gravano has his own website or his own YouTube channel that's exploding. And all he does is go on and tell these gangster stories. And, he's telling the story. So, of course, in every story that he tells, he's making himself look amazing, right? And this guy's he's a known, he worked with the feds to take out, people he knew that were close to him when he was doing just as much wrong, but yet he's a big star right now. Michael Franchese, who I enjoy his YouTube page, same thing, tells all these gangsters, and they all say the same. All these gangsters that turn state's evidence, they all say, I never put any friend of mine away. And it's like, it's absolute BS. They put a lot of people away. That's why they're out of jail, even though they've done horrific things. And, then you look at like 6ix9ine. This guy, it's probably the worst story and the worst example of snitching that I've ever seen. Literally, his best friend, this guy Kuda, that this rapper 6ix9ine, paid him $30,000 to go shoot at Chief Keef's manager. And then he ratted him out for shooting at Chief Keef's manager. And like everybody around 6ix9ine got like football digits, like football scores in years, 15 years, 20 years, like insane amount of time. And he obviously skated. And now Steve Ledoux to the Nelk Boys is pretty much single-handedly reviving this guy's career. And suddenly everybody's starting to love 6ix9ine again. It's just such a weird time. And truthfully, Connor has been brutal, and he's said all kinds of stuff and crossed all kinds of lines, but it didn't hurt his fan base at all. And then you look at Jake Paul. Here's a guy that is just really unlikable. Again, I love his story, and I love that he's been like almost like medically his medical precision with the people that he's picking to fight. And this Woodley fight, everybody's excited about this because everybody wants to see Jake just get knocked the fuck out. Everybody wants to see this. I think Woodley's probably a guy he shouldn't have chose. If Woodley can even halfway box, he has a pretty good chance, I think, of destroying Jake. But Jake can hit. He can hit a ton. But regardless of all that, what's interesting is it's almost like being a villain pays off. And that is really weird to me because, again, when I was growing up, the first guy that I looked up to was Joe Montana. And he had this incredible, name, and he was squeaky clean, and he was, Mr. Super Bowl. That was like the guy that I looked up to, like when I was younger coming up. In baseball, Andre Dawson was like, the Hawk was like my favorite player ever. I'm a Cubs fan, and he was just amazing to watch play. And again, great reputation, no real, nothing bad about his personality. And I look around right now, there's not a lot of that going on, especially in the world of social media. It just seems like the more villainous you can be, the bigger you get. I mean, look, Logan Paul, and I do think that he did probably learn his lesson to some degree because he has this impulsive podcast, which really kind of shows who he is as a person, which I think was a brilliant move for him. But, look, this guy went into the forest, in Japan, in the suicide forest, and showed, a video of a kid who hung himself. And, afterwards he's like, I didn't know that would hurt anybody's feelings. It's like, how about the kid's family? How about let's start with them, dude, And he, monetized that video, too, which is insane. And so I was Laura and I were discussing, why is this happening? Why are just shitty people, becoming absolutely huge by being a villain? And we had slightly different reactions. First of all, Laura hates it. I mean, she's just like, listen, I don't want any of my kids. She's a school teacher, a first grade teacher, and she's like, I don't want none of my kids looking up to 6ix9ine or Jake Paul. And she goes, and I hear it every day. They all want to be YouTubers. Every kid in my school, they want to be YouTubers. That's what they all want to do. And I get that because the youth is so plugged in. They're so plugged in. So, of course, they want to emulate what they see. Kids are different. I think kids are very easily walked down a path, right? They're very easily walked down a path. But there's a lot of adults, obviously. I mean, look, McGregor acted like a monster going into this fight. Literally telling Dustin he's going to kill him, that his body will be a corpse on a stretcher in a sport where that's very possible. But yet he was by far the more popular fighter. So what is it, again, what is it about society right now that is breeding these super villain stars? And have they always existed? The first time that I realized that I was into the story of a villain was Pablo Escobar. I've read every book on Escobar. I've watched every interview with anybody who's ever known him. I was so into Pablo Escobar. And that doesn't mean that I was a fan of him as a person. Look, as a person, this guy was a monster. But what's really weird is that monster had an incredibly loyal side to him that was also very loving and caring to his family. And my biggest pet peeve in movies, when I watch Hollywood movies, is when they make the bad guy so brazenly evil that he becomes almost like inhuman. You know what I mean? Because in everybody, I think, everybody to me is kind of like Anakin Skywalker. You pull off the helmet, there's Darth Vader, but you pull the helmet off, there's Anakin. And, Luke's like, I know there's good in you, I want to believe that there's good in everyone. But, Laura just basically said, listen, I just think, people have a lot of pent-up anger, and they like seeing aspects of that anger on other people. They like seeing other people fulfill a lot of these rage-type elements that they want to do. Or people who have done, crazy adventurous things like robbing a bank and, all this old mob stuff. And my thought was, I don't know that it's, people want to be those people. Because I think most people, if you said, do you want to be Sammy the Bull Gravano? They would go, no. In and out of jail, killing a bunch of people, and now that I'm out, having to look over my shoulder everywhere I go. Most people would say, no, I wouldn't want to live that life, regardless of what they have right now. Same thing with 6ix9ine. Do you want to be known as just a dirty rat to everybody. And, I mean, he signed a $10 million deal before he ever came out. What I think it is, plain and simple, I don't think it's that deep. I think it's just a cult of personality. I think if you have the personality, there's so much exposure on these people. The more and more you watch, you start to feel, even though it's not true, you start to feel like you know them. The followers of Jake Paul have seen 10,000 videos of him. So they feel like they know who he is, which they know a part of who he is, the part that he shares. And that's a thing that kind of brought me back to the Paranormal State days. It was crazy to me how many people, when I was doing Paranormal State, thought that I was just this like Harley motorcycle rock and roll type dude that just sweared every other word out of my mouth. And I'm not bitching at the show because I knew what they were using and I knew what they needed. And because that is a slice of my personality, I was fine. So, anybody who ever bitches about being on a reality show, they're lying. They can't use what you don't give them, right? So I was okay with that. But I saw it from the inside when I would show up and meet people. They would really feel like they knew me, right? So I think that's just what's going on. In our day and age, there's so much exposure that you see so many sides of these people and you start feeling like you know them. And when you know someone, if you like something about them, you want to cheer for them. Like Michael Franchese, like he did all these terrible things as a mobster, and then he gets out and he's like, I found Jesus, I found God, now I want to be a positive guy, now I want to help people. And you want to root for that, right? You want to be like, in the sense that you don't want an evil person to stay evil, right? You don't want them to stay bad. And the idea that they were always just all bad isn't true, because people just aren't like that. We're very complex people. Like Sammy the Bull. Here's a guy that has all kinds of bodies, like, 19, 20 people that he's killed, and he's a YouTube star. He's killed people. Besides being a rat, he's killed people. And he's a big star on YouTube right now. That's weird, but I think it's for the same reason. I think that people just want to believe that no matter who you are, you can be rehabbed and come out the other end okay. Which ultimately, man, it's up to the creator to judge all these people. But the one out of all of them that really does bother me, and, whatever deal he cut, what bothered me, the 6ix9ine thing really does bother me. And I liked 6ix9ine before all this happened. The fact that he used all these dudes, and they were using him too, both ways, without question. Shoddy and all the guys. If you guys don't know the story, this rapper 6ix9ine exploded and became like the #1 rapper in the world. And basically the feds were all over him because he had a known gang member manage him. And in return, the gang kind of grandfathered him into the gang. He didn't have to do any kind of, anything to get in the gang. They just let him be in the gang. And then 6ix9ine used his gang affiliation to promote himself. And it worked. It worked in a big way. And when the feds came in and came down on him and arrested 6ix9ine, his entire crew, he turned state's evidence against them, was cooperating with them. And literally 7 or 8 guys got 10, 15 plus years in jail. And 6ix9ine did a year, or I think a year and a half. And they let him out. He was free, and he signed the $10 million deal before he did. And he set the record for Instagram Live, something like 2 million concurrent viewers, signed a $10 million deal. And now he's in league with the Nelk Boys, who are the biggest story in the world on YouTube. And Steve Will Do It is just blowing him up again. That story bothers me, only for this reason. Look, of course he's going to do anything he can to save himself from getting... He was facing 42 years, they said, the maximum. What sucks about it to me is he chose to be a gangster. When you choose that, you're not a civilian anymore, man. You're a gangster. You're actively choosing to, hire hitmen, which, again, 6ix9ine's on tape, literally saying, I got 30K, a 30 pack, he says, on this guy's head. He was that stupid. He was walking around just saying that stuff out loud as the cameras were rolling. He was around multiple fights, multiple gunfights. The gang that he was a part of moved a ton of fentanyl, which is obviously killing people at an alarming rate. And again, he hired his best friend to take a shot at this rival rapper. And like I said earlier, he goes to jail, he flips and puts that guy in jail. Now his story is, he says, well, they weren't loyal to me because they were sleeping with my baby mama. And at one point he got kidnapped by one of the guys who kind of split off from the group and beat up and robbed. So he kind of grouped them on one group and just said, I'm not going to be loyal to them. They were not loyal to me. Now, who knows what really happened, right? But what I do know is that he chose to be a part of that life. He chose to do that stuff. When you choose to do that stuff, I just think part of being a man is, fessing up to what you did. And that's something that he was not willing to do unless he could walk and then rat on everyone. So I don't know. I would think most people would be disloyal if they were facing 40 years and you showed them a way out. It just sucks that you would be rewarded for something that dirty. Just being a rat, man. And this happened to, Whitey Bulger when they arrested him here in Santa Monica. He lived 2 blocks from me, by the way, when they arrested him, which is wild. He was in a wheelchair and he got tortured and killed when he went to jail for being a rat. So that's a rough stance. You know what I mean? But I think it becomes a harder conversation when you say, what would have I done? What would I have done in that situation? If you're 6ix9ine, you're facing 40-some years, and you can take out your entire crew, everyone who helped you get there. Do you do it? Do you flip on them all? 6ix9ine did. Look, I would like to think that I would have more loyalty than that. That if they all held strong as co-defendants and didn't snitch anybody out, they probably wouldn't have got those types of years. It's just harder when from what I understand, it's harder to bring a bunch of people down when nobody's snitching on everybody, and it's a front of people together. That happened to Sean Atwood. Again, here's another guy that at one point was a supervillain that is now huge on the web. Sean Atwood was the English Molly kingpin that got arrested out here, and was making like $1 million a week, supplying pretty much southwestern U.S. with Molly. And he got busted, did 7 years in Arizona, came out, and now he's a huge star on YouTube. So for some reason, we hate what drugs do to people, but we love drug dealers, man, which is wild. But back to the question of what would I do if I was involved with something bad and I got caught. Well, as it turns out, I have a couple stories for you that I'll share. And one of them was the closest I ever came to dumping Laura. And we'll get to why here in a bit. But let me first just start by saying, when I was in high school, my best friend, I'll call him TJ now because these stories are kind of bad, but he's a preacher now, which is mind-blowing once you hear everything that I'm going to tell you. But he was my best friend, and TJ was an absolute madman. But he was my kind of crazy, man. Like, he just, in most ways, he loved the edge, so did I, and together we were a hurricane, man. But the one thing that was funny is, he loved, like, whenever it came to joking, the worst the joke can be, just the gnarliest the joke can be about anybody or anything, we would just try to make it as bad as we could, like, oh, don't say that type of thing. And it just was funny to us. That's just our personality. And, we were both like starting linebackers together. He lived a block from me. It's funny, when I first met him, after fighting, we literally got into a dozen fights because I was this outsider that moved to this small town. And I just kept, literally waking up to school, fighting him before the bus came, fighting him at school, fighting him after the bus came. And after about 12 fistfights, he knocked on my door and just said, "Hey, man, you want to go play some football?" And we were friends after that. So I guess that's how it started. But anyways, we were in class, bored as hell, and we had a study hall. And we both signed out at the same time. It just so happened we signed out to go use the restroom. Okay, so I'm in the restroom, using the restroom, and I hear him say, "Hey, man, you shouldn't play with fire when you go into the bathroom." And he started laughing as he's walking out. And I'm like, "What?" And I look over, and there's a trash can, and it's where all like the used papers go after you wash your hands, right? And I look back, and there's smoke coming out of it. And I thought, man, while I'm using the urinal, he lights this on fire. No problem. I'll walk over and just put it out. To him, that would be funny. He thought, like, let me light this little fire here, and then Chad's got to hustle over and put it out. As I'm walking over to it, this thing implodes. I mean, like, just goes up, and I'm like, oh my God. I think what happened was this trash can also doubled in the cafeteria. And I think they must have poured grease or something in the bottom of it, which my best friend didn't know. Okay? TJ didn't know. And by the time he's around the corner and I walk over there, I'm just like, dude, this thing is so huge. There is no way I can put this fire out. I start throwing water in it, and it's like doing nothing. So I didn't know what to do. So I just shut it, went running out of there, caught up with them right before we got back to class, and told them what happened. I'm just like, dude, there is an inferno in the bathroom right now. Why did you do that? And he's like, what do you mean it's an inferno? He goes, I just tossed a match in there, one match. And I'm like, no, dude, that thing went up like nobody's business. And this is happening right now, like in the school. So I just didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? So we both sat down, and like 2 minutes after we sit down, the fire alarm goes off. And I am like, oh my God. They rush everybody out of the school. Everybody. We get outside, and I'm looking at TJ, and I'm like, yo, dude. He's like, stop looking at me. In fact, stop standing by me. He was like so paranoid, he was freaking out. And I'm going, dude, what? I'm just saying. We're going to know that this happened when we were gone because you got to sign out, right? You got to sign out to go to the bathroom. And he's like, I don't care. I don't care. And I'm just like, dude, well, we better get a story quick, man, because this thing is not going to go away, So he finally just, says to me, look, all we do is hold strong. And we said we have no idea what happened. So I'm like, well, that is the one thing that's true. Like, I mean, we were only in there, just me and him. And look, I don't want to, it was a stupid thing that he did that backfired. And I obviously don't want to see him get in any kind of, trouble for this. I mean, he's already freaking out like, God, this was a stupid thing I did. What the hell? Well, it was a lot bigger deal than even we considered at that time. The police came. And they thought it was a potential arson, and then the local FBI field office came, and that guy, my other best friend that I played baseball with, his dad worked for the local or the FBI field office in Omaha. And if you guys go back to my very, very first episode, this is the guy that hired me to work undercover for like 3 months for the FBI. And to do that big bust, we took down like the biggest underground illegal porn ring in Omaha. It's a crazy, wild story. If you haven't heard it, you can go back to it. So the only saving grace that I had is this was about a year after that. So I knew my buddy's dad, the FBI guy. So I knew him. So I just felt like, look, I've done work for them. If this gets really, really bad for some reason and they, come talk to me, at least I know him. That's, some kind of conversation I could have with a friendly, and I wouldn't be going into it blind. And I was just like, man, this is getting bad. So they ended up putting the fire out, but the following day the police come, and then my buddy's dad from the FBI comes. And first they come on the speaker, and like I thought, they asked for TJ. So he goes, meets with them for about an hour, and then he comes back, and we're in the same class again. And I'm like, what happened? And he's like, listen, I denied everything. I didn't say a word. You hold strong, and there's no issues. There's nothing they can do. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, you haven't told anybody, right? And I'm like, well, I told Laura. And he's like, you told your girlfriend? I'm like, yeah. He was like, are you fucking stupid? I'm just like, dude, it's my girl. Like, don't worry. She's not going to say anything. So minutes later, they call me in. I walk in, and they sit down. And the principal's going, hey, listen, man. I know you guys set the fire. And I said, I didn't set any fire. And he's like, look, we have both of your names signing out. That's the closest bathroom to you. And I said, well, listen, man, I did not start any fire. I am being honest with you. I started no fire. And he's like, so TJ started. I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, well, if it wasn't you, it was him. I'm like, I did not see him start a fire, which was technically true. I didn't see him start it. And he's going, so you didn't see him? So I go, no, I don't know, man. I go, listen, weird things happen with fire and oil. And that thing's right by the cafeteria. I don't know what happened, man. So this went on for this rope-a-dope went on for an hour. I come back out. I talk with I'm like, yeah, I didn't say anything. We were freaked out for a good month because they kept coming back and asking us more and more questions to try to see if our stories match. It didn't match. But eventually, because we just held tight and didn't say a word and we knew nobody was in there, eventually it went away. And Laura was never questioned, thank God. I mean, I really fully believe there's no way that Laura would give this information up. Having said that, fast forward about another 3 months. I should have mentioned this earlier. Probably the only reason that Laura and I are together today, as far as a very simple reason, is her last name was Brick and mine was Calek, and it was alphabetical order. That means our lockers were always by each other. That meant at least 8 times a day for 5 minutes, I had access to Laura. And that's how I worked on her so long before she finally, after saying no to me for the better of 2 years to go on a date, that's how she finally said yes. But anyways, back to this story. Basically, Laura comes back in between a class to her locker, which is next to my locker. And I open my locker, and there's this huge trumpet in it. And I'm like, what is this? And Laura looks over and she was like, why do you have a trumpet in your locker? I'm like, I don't know. My buddy TJ walks right by and goes, dude, it's mine. It's all good. Grabs it, literally pulls it behind me and goes walking out to his car. So I'm like, what is going on, man? And Laura looks at me and she's like, yeah, you need to figure out what's going on. So I follow TJ out and I'm talking to him and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Well, 2 weeks earlier, he legitimately had a bunch of money stole out of his wallet and he had a gold necklace stole. And this happened at PE when that stuff was in the locker room. He felt like he knew who did it, and he thought it was 3 people. He was pissed. He wanted to get them back. They all happened to be in band. So he went to the band room and stole all their instruments. And he filled up his locker, and he had one more that was in there. I never locked my locker. You're supposed to. I just never had anything valuable in there, so I never did. And he knew that. So he went over and stuck it in my locker. Okay. So when I run out to him, I'm just like, hey, what's going on? And basically he explains to me, yeah, he stole this shit. And I said to him, I go, dude, you should have never, put that in my locker. I'm not down with stealing anything. And I'm like, what are you going to do with this stuff? And he's like, don't worry about it. It's all good. I'm like, dude, for real, think about this because this can go bad. This can go really, really bad. And he's like, no, it's fine, dude. Don't worry about it. So at that point, I got my next class coming up. The bell rings. You can't be late for class or else they just give you a hard time. So I'm just like, all right, dude, just nothing in my locker, nothing. And he's like, okay, no problem. So the next day comes And basically, I see him, walking in, so I run back out. And I go, I've been thinking about this all night, man. You really need to give that stuff back. And he goes, too late. And he like smiles. And he's like, I got paid. And I'm like, oh, dude, what did you do? And he goes, I just took it to a pawn shop. And I knew enough about pawn shops. I go, so what'd you do? Just like scrape down the serial numbers or whatever? And he goes, no. He goes, I just went to like the total hood pawn shop in South Omaha. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're not thinking. I go, listen, TJ, I'm telling you right now that there's a computer system and there's a way where these things, when they come in, they confirm that they're not stolen. And he goes, and if they come up as stolen, then the person who, got it they'll prosecute him, man. They'll go after it. And he's like, no, that's not the case. I'm like, yes. And he was like, this place was like dingy, dude. There's no way. And I'm like, TJ, I'm telling you, man, you made a massive, massive mistake. And this is going to come back, man, hard. And I got angry with him. I said, God, why did you stick that fucking trumpet in my locker, man? And he's like, dude, I just had no room. You're freaking out for no reason. It's fine. Well, a week later, police show up, as well as my friend's dad, who works for the FBI field office, who's hearing about over supposedly $5,000 worth of horns that were stolen, which I had no idea that these horns were that expensive. And I also had no idea that if it was over $5,000 and it crossed state lines, because we're in Iowa and he went to Omaha, Nebraska, that it's a felony. And that's why the feds got involved, which, again, thankfully, my buddy's dad is the guy that shows back up. But I can tell you right away that this is real serious, like real serious. Kind of the same process. They called TJ in over the loudspeaker, went and shook him down. He came back and told me, dude, you don't know anything. You don't know nothing. And I'm like, I don't, man. All I know is what you shoved in my locker and what you just told me, man. I don't have a part of this, dude. I'm not a thief, period. And it's just, it was a line to me that should have never been crossed. But again, I don't want my best friend to go to jail. What I want him to do is find a way to get the horns and give them back. That's what I want to do. And I don't know if they've been sold yet or not, or I don't know anything about it. But I just want them, and then TJ realizes you did something really fucking stupid, man, and you shouldn't do it. So they bring me in, they sit me down, and kind of the same thing. They're like, look, we think you know what's up. And I'm like, with what? And they start naming off, there's like 3 or 4, and maybe even more, like saxophone, trombone, trumpet, like all this stuff that was stolen. And I'm like, listen, I didn't steal anything, man. And he's going, well, we think you know everything that's happened. And I'm like, well, why would you think that? And they're like, because we're almost certain that TJ did this. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. We will find out for sure. And I'm like, well, I can talk to him, man. I can tell you guys right now, I didn't steal anything. I don't know anything at all, So this goes on over and over again. I leave, I go back, talk to TJ and go, listen, dude, I totally lied for you, stalled them out. Just, I'm together with you, man. I'm saying I don't know anything, but I'm just telling you, man, like this is going to go really bad. I think you need to go just confess and then get back there as fast as you can, get the horns and get this back over. Just get it done with. You know what I mean? A day later, the police come back, same thing with my buddy's dad who works for the FBI, and they call me back in. And this time, they know all kinds of details. All kinds of details. We know a trumpet was in your locker. We know that you went outside and talked to TJ after these things were stolen. We know that they were sold to a pawn shop in South Omaha. And I'm sitting here going, how do they know this many details? How do they know? I was like, are there cameras and that I don't know? And remember, this is like 1993, way before there was tons of CCTV cameras and all that stuff. And they were even saying things like, we know you had a conversation with him about the serial numbers. And I mean, I was freaking out because they know way too much. But because I did not steal these things, because I did not put the horn in my locker, I'm just holding my front, right? Just holding it, just saying, listen, I didn't steal anything. I don't know anything. That's the last I have to say about it, period. You know? So they let me go back to study hall, and they call him in. Now, before he goes in, I say to him, I go, dude, they've got a ton of information. They know something, man. Something. And he's like, well, did you tell anybody about this? And I'm like, well, you know, I told Laura some details, but she saw the trumpet. She saw you grab it and go out. And he's like, you think she talked? And I'm like, well, when? She's never been called into the office. You know, we would know that because, you know, whenever they would call you to the office, it would come over the speakers in the room. And the whole school would hear who's being called to the office. I said, dude, she hasn't been questioned. She hasn't been called to the office at all. And I don't think there's any way in hell, dude, that she's going to just snitch on you because that could potentially take me down. I don't think there's any chance. So I went right after this and talked to Laura and said, did you say anything to these dudes? She pauses for a really long time. She says, no. I'm like, they haven't questioned you here? Ain't nothing? She's like, no. And I go, man, they just know a lot. And she's like, they haven't questioned me here. I'm like, okay. So I go back, I talk to TJ and say, listen, man, she said they haven't not questioned her here. They haven't brought her in, nothing. So I don't know. I go, maybe there's a camera system around here. Maybe someone else is just guessing right. I don't know. But I'm like, just own it, man. Just go in and own it because I don't want to go down for this. I had nothing to do with this. So own it. He's like, fuck that. I ain't own anything. You know, he's just keep the front and we'll be good. So I go home and this is really, really bothering me. I mean, my stomach is just turning because I was a lot of things. I was not a thief. Period. Can't stand it. Hate it. Don't want nothing to do with it. Totally pissed off at him for doing it. That just was not who I was. So I ended up calling Laura. And I'm like, hey, babe, I'm just like super freaked out, man. And she's like, well, why? Talk to me. And I'm like, well, I just think it's going to come down. I think they're going to get him. And I think they're going to try to loop me into it because I knew, you know, but I knew after the fact. I knew after he took it there. I didn't know before. I mean, I knew he grabbed stuff and because he threw this in my locker, but I didn't give him access to my locker. He just did that. And I'm like, I am just between such a rock and a hard place. And I just cannot bring myself to snitch on my best friend. I can't. I can't. I so badly want to walk in and go, you fucking did it. He grabbed all of it. I had nothing to do with it. I got roped into this, and now I'm here talking to you. And I go, Laura, I don't know how. You know, I don't know how to snitch on my best friend and get him in some serious legal, you know, trouble that could lead to jail time. And she goes, well, you don't have to. And I go, wait, so you're with me? You get it? She goes, no, you don't have to. And I go, why are you saying that? And she goes, because I already did. I was like, what are you talking about? And she goes, the principal, Mr. Nanning was his name. She goes, he called here at my house in which they were trying to rope you into this and charge you guys, both of you, with theft. And she goes, I told him everything I knew. I said, I know a lot about Chad. I know him better than anybody else. I can promise you he's not a thief. He's not a thief. And she was like, he wanted nothing to do with this. It was thrown into his locker before he even knew what was up. And the only thing he's guilty of is not wanting to hurt his best friend. And I'm like, you told them all this. She's like, yes. And I died inside. I was just like, you fucking rat. I was so hurt. But I was hurt because I was a young, immature boy. The more and more I talked it through with Laura, she did it because she loved me and she could not stomach the fact that they were calling me a thief. She couldn't live with it. You know, she's like, you're a lot of things, man. You're loud, you're obnoxious, you're crazy. She goes, I know you. I saw how pissed you were. I know that that's not something you would do. And I know you tried to talk him into going to get it and bring it back. It took me a long time to really understand that she was actually loving me. She was loving me. She was doing what I probably should have had the courage to do. I just couldn't. Man, when I love someone, I am such a loyal person. And I love TJ like a brother, man. And I just kept thinking, he's going to go to jail for this, like for a long time. And I just didn't want that to happen. But that was such a crushing blow that Laura, I believe, lied to me. Well, as it turns out, technically, she didn't lie to me, because when I asked her at school if she was called into the office and questioned, she wasn't. She said no. And she was just hoping that it would all resolve itself, before she obviously had to get involved. But she said, like I said, when the principal called her house and was basically telling her, listen, I know Chad knows, and I guess I'm calling you because I want to know the details. I know these guys are both in on this. And she was finally like, hey, listen, no, they're not. No, they're not. Chad just doesn't want to hurt his friend. He's trying to be loyal. This is what's up. And I got over it. But then I had to go talk to TJ and say, hey, man, I know who the snitch is, and this is going to be real, real hard for me to say. And right away, he was like, Laura. And I go, yeah. And he said the same thing. That fucking rat. And I said, dude, stop. I'm like, dude, she's actually, in a very odd way, being extremely loyal to me like she should. And I'm like, do you think I should be charged with thievery? I asked TJ this, and he goes, no, I don't. No. He's like, I roped you into this. I should have asked you if I could put the horn in your locker. And I go, listen, they're getting ready to charge both of us. And they called Laura. And she just couldn't let that happen because she knew I wasn't a part of it. I said, look, it was different. If I was a part of this and I came up with this plan with you and I wanted to steal all this shit, then look, man, I would go down with you. I'm like, but I'm not a part of this, man. And I don't dig it. I've been telling you since the beginning it was a bad movie. You need to get the horns. You need to give them back. I don't dig it, man. And so don't call her a rat. She was being loyal to me. And I go, didn't trust me, dude. It was very hard for me to kind of understand that and wrap my mind around it, because my first goal was to just break up with her. I was just like, if I can't trust you with this information, then I can't be with you, But again, I was a very immature, stupid young kid that was, meant well in my rationale and reasoning. And obviously I look back at it now as an adult and I mean, like, I just shouldn't have been involved, period, man. And, with him, when he was doing that, I should have told him right there on the spot, hey, if this thing goes down, I'm outing you. I'm not going to be a part of this. But I didn't. So I was trying to hold tight to the truth. Eventually, TJ got over the fact that Laura ratted him out. And about a year later, when everything had passed, oh, by the way, what happened was he did show up the next day. TJ walked into the office and said, hey, listen, Chad had nothing to do with this. Laura had nothing to do with this. I did it. This is why. I can go get the horns and I'll give them back. And that's actually what happened. He did not get charged with anything, which I think has something to do with the fact that he was our starting linebacker and our starting wide receiver, and also our starting power forward on our basketball team. And when you live in small town Iowa, that's how it rolls. Like I told you, man, my high school was the most corrupt thing I've ever seen. I mean, literally. I'll get into more of those stories later. But in the only situation in high school that I was ever in where I had the option to snitch, I guess I didn't, and I just felt like I couldn't. I felt like I would be sending my friend to jail, as backwards as that sounds, and I didn't. And I later really saw that what was going on is with Laura is that she was actually being loyal to me, as she should have been. She had no loyalty to Travis, in regard into that way. I mean, I was her serious boyfriend. That's actually what she should have done. So just another story as to why Laura is an amazing, amazing person. And she actually got me out of a lot of trouble, because if TJ would have just walked in and said, oh, it was just me, they might have even looked at it like, oh, he's just trying to protect Chad now, But when they heard it from Laura, they knew she wasn't going to lie about anything, which I got nothing. I mean, not so much as a slap on the hand. So pretty wild story. And trust me, there's more where that came from. But I just thought it related to this whole conversation about would you or wouldn't you snitch, right? So I'd love to know what you guys think about this. Why are supervillains becoming so popular and so big? And do you think that they should be, right? Should they be? And also, what would you do if you were in a tough situation with someone that you knew did wrong, and you could either, tell the truth, or, would you hold strong? It's an interesting question to ask, and I would love to hear what you guys have to think. All right, having said that, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the In a Crowded Room podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.